Okay, 3, 2, 1, going live. Getting in early, just waiting for a few more to arrive. And we'll go from there. Thanks for joining me this evening. Had a reasonable crowd this afternoon, and I'm hoping to get the same today. We'll see what happens. Tonight, I mean. Alright, 7 o'clock bang on, so let's get started. Obviously, I appreciate you being on time, even if no one else is. So, I just wanted to set these up for this period while we're having a bit of downtime. This isn't a sales pitch, this is just informational. It's hopefully going to help some of my clients understand what the market's doing at the moment, what it may do in the future. None of us have a crystal ball. Anyone that tells you that they have, obviously, do not listen to them. Originally, I wasn't going to do a presentation as such, but I thought I'd put one together just in case. And judging by this afternoon session, it's just as well I did, because it didn't end up being as interactive as I'd hoped. But please, if you have any questions, if you have a YouTube account, you can pop them through to me on the YouTube panel there that allows you to pop through some questions, and I can answer them from there. Or even better, feel free to pop me through a text message just with your name. For the first time you send it, just your name on the first one, and then the question. If you can do that through to 0412 969 366. So that's 0412 969 366. Alright. So what I want to do to start with is kick us off with going through my PowerPoint here, and we can hopefully see where I've been, where I've come from, what's happening in the market at the moment, potential opportunities, and the like. So hopefully that's going to come up in just a moment. There it is. So, right, so that's me, Frank Days Property Group. Look, this is my first time. I'll apologise up front. This is my first time using YouTube as a webinar type tool, and I am getting used to it, so please bear with me. And there we go. So a little bit about me. So I bought my first property way back in 1990. That was my first purchase that was my home, so PPR, and we managed to do some renovations and some landscaping on that property, which realised some relatively nice returns when I sold it a couple of years later. Now, to give you some context around this is Christchurch, 1990, and I think I paid about 60 grand for it. We had it for a few years, did some work, got rid of the swimming pool, put in a nice backyard. Swimming pool wastes time in Christchurch, a bit like Melbourne and some aspects there. Pretty cosmetic stuff. And we sold it a few years later for about 142, I think, off the top of my head. So that was quite nice. I've been doing this professionally for 19 years. I had a stint away from it just while my daughter was growing up. One of those life-changing moments when my father passed away. I realised my daughter I think she was about 5 or 6 at the time, and I hadn't seen her grow up at all, too busy with work. So I got out of it until She was a bit older and got back into it as soon as I could. My experience has been gained across New Zealand. That's all in Christchurch, in Queensland and Victoria. And I've dabbled in a little bit of commercial, primarily residential, and specifically investment stuff since I've been in Melbourne, so that's for the last 5 or 6 years. And I'll talk a little bit later about the stuff that I'm focusing on now, but you're probably aware of it anyway. That's my Class 1B stuff. So if we have a look at what the market's doing at the moment, obviously there's an opportunity there. Whenever we see a change in the market, change will equate to opportunity. And it just depends on what we do with that opportunity. Now, I don't encourage any of my clients to jump in without any research, and certainly don't jump into a market that you are not fully aware of the potential risks and consequences. But if you partner with a property professional, that's going to allow you to avoid any more, the majority of that risk. So what's the current opportunity? We have historically low levels of interest rates, which has been getting lower and lower by the month. They held the rates today, so that's good, because whilst low interest rates are great for those of us buying property, it's not a real good indicator about the overall economy, and obviously it really impacts those who are trying to save money or living off retirement funds. Population growth, right now we're not seeing much of that, but obviously that's something that we need to be aware of on an ongoing basis. Record government spending on infrastructure, so both rail and road, and we'll see what happens with the airlines. Rising building costs. Now, this is one of those things that a lot of my clients say to me, well, things are quiet at the moment, you should be able to get stuff cheaper, or we're building multiple projects at one time, we should be able to get things cheaper, materials cheaper. Well, it doesn't always equate to that. My builders and I, we've done some deals with our suppliers, so we know that we're getting the best available rates in the country. Ironically, the more the demand goes up, so does the price, because obviously it's the same as anything, supply and demand. And then when things get slow, and we haven't seen things slow for a while, but when things do get slow, instead of the suppliers dropping their costs to try and move more, they actually put it up to try and make larger margins to keep their profitability at the same levels. So rising building costs is just a fact of life that we have to put up with. Dwelling shortage, particularly around the affordable housing stuff, and obviously we still have depreciation for those of us who are only interested in buying new. Now, I say only new, I'm talking from an investment perspective only. If it's something that you want to live in, knock yourself out, buy something that was built in 1860, it doesn't matter. But from a investment perspective, I would always recommend new. Much better for your taxes. So is now a good time to invest? Obviously that's a question that most of us are looking at, but we have to take into account what history has taught us, and that is that history repeats itself. We go through cycles. Yes, this current cycle is effectively a man-made cycle, if I can put it that way. Chinese-made, I don't know. But it's not something that was a natural part of the economy, and it's sort of been enforced upon us by something out of the box. 2017, that was our normal cycle. So in October 2017, I wrote some articles which stated that I believed we had 18 to 24 month window where pricing would be quite soft in the marketplace, and for my clients it was a great opportunity to buy, and those that did have done very well out of it. Those who tried to pick the bottom of the market pretty much failed. But the reality was, I sort of said we had an 18 to 24 month window to get in amongst it, and pretty much to the day, it was about September, October 2019 when that curve started heading back up. The problem with trying to pick the bottom is all the data that we live off of is typically, at best a month old, but sometimes as much as 4 months old. So we're not dealing with the now. Um, so you have to pick your cycles. We've got supply and demand issues. That's always going to be part of what we deal with when it comes to property sales. At the moment, there's a pretty level playing field in the supply and demand. So a lot of properties have been removed from the market, and the demand has dropped off significantly as well. Mainly because people are worried about their jobs. Are they going to be able to service their loan, etc.? Some of the banks have actually turned around and stopped. People have had loans approved 6 weeks ago, and today they've been knocked back. So there's less buyers in the market, but there's also less supply. So it's staying pretty even at the moment. I think the main thing that may change that is if in a month or two, a few people who have been trying to hold off putting their properties on the market get to the point where they have to sell, whether it's because there's been a death in the family, there's a separation, they had already purchased another property and they need to move. Whatever that case may be, that supply may pick up a bit, which may soften the market a bit. The reality is, whatever happens, it's only going to be for a relatively short window. Okay, so if you're in a position where you have funds available, any time in the next 6 months is going to be a good time to buy it. If you're confident that your job is safe, if you have the funds. We've got a very secure banking system. So one thing that's come out of the back of the Royal Commission into banking is that the way that they go about their business means that if you are qualifying for money from them, it means you tick a shitload of boxes. Okay, you know that if the bank have said yes, you're good to go. I know that you probably are aware of that already, but once you have their tick of approval, it should give you a lot more confidence that yes, I'm doing the right thing. I should move forward. Government stimulus. We've seen a lot of that stimulus around the housing for the last year or two, and obviously now it's more focused on the jobs, which is going to allow people to continue paying their mortgage, pay their rent. But there still will be a large group of people who are going to have to downsize or find something a bit cheaper to live in, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. A sip of coffee. Fundamentals don't change. So it doesn't matter what market we're in, the fundamentals remain the same. People need a roof over their head. They want a roof over their head in an area that will be close to employment, it'll be close to shopping, it'll be close to transport. Now, whether they have a vehicle or not, for myself, as an example, I live right on St Kilda Road, so I'm always using public transport. I rarely use my car unless I need to go out to the burbs to check out sites or whatever. But if I've got meetings in and around town, I'd say 80% of the time I'm using public transport. If not any of those, it should be near some main roads, carriageways for vehicles. Now, properties versus shares. This is always something that we need to sort of get our heads around. I want to show you something that I found interesting. And if we go here, doesn't want to do it for me. Okay, let's do this. Alright, so the beautiful part about shares is that they have very good data and it's live. It's all the time, okay? But this particular graph here is excellent. What we know is that this here was 2007. So this is when Kevin 07 got in, and we saw on the back of that the GFC, and we see what happens to the share market. Basically dropped its pants, started off at near 7, so 6808, and dropped down to 3265. So more than half of the values on those shares were wiped out in a very, very well. No one I knew had been impacted by the GFC. No one lost their jobs. No one went bankrupt that I know. No one businesses went under. Yet this is what happened to the share market, because what happens is we're an emotional bunch. We wear our hearts on our sleeves, even though investing should be all about the numbers and the logic. That's not what happens. And what we can see here is a bang. Now, this actually impacted me because, as I said, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's happening any more than you do, apart from being able to read certain cycles. I had completed a house in sort of early 2000 to mid 2007, and we had built it as our PPR, so principal place of residence. But we had done such a good job of it, I thought it would be a good opportunity to cash in and sell it. And it would have been about here when I thought about it, or maybe a bit earlier, so about August, I sort of brought it up with the family. And I was convinced by then that we should hold on to it for at least one summer, enjoy the fruits of our labour, and then sell it the following year. So obviously what's happened is we saw the price going up, hit the peak at November, and then bang, away she went, and we'd missed the boat effectively. So I then sold it about here. Now, my potential loss was huge, right? It was 30% drop between there and when we sold it. I was fortunate because this is shares, so it doesn't really relate. But I had to hold on to it till sort of mid 2009, and I probably lost about 50 grand all up. But this is what the market's done, and we can see here again what's happening when the coronavirus hit. Pretty much above that peak that it was back in 07. It's taken us 13 years to get back to here, or 12 and a half years to get back to here. One thing happens, and bang, lost 50% again. So that's where that's at. Now, if we compare that with what happens in the sorry, I've got something in the back here with the property on it I want to show you. I think I can find it when I need it. Of course not. I must have closed it. 1 second, sorry about this. This is it. So at that same time, what we saw was the property market. This was 2007. We saw a bit of a dip here, and then off she went again. Now, so that must be about 2007 here. Now, I remember at that time, Dr. Stephen Keen out of Sydney University, I think he is. He's an economic guru, in his mind. Well, I remember it was about here, and he told everyone to sell everything. Sell everything apart from what you need to live in, because the bubble was bursting, the wheels were falling off, the sky was going to fall, and then look what's happened here. This took. So you think about if he sold it there, it doubled in price over that period. So he must be kicking himself. So here we hit 2017, and we see the market taking a bit of a breath. It was about there when I wrote my articles, and sure enough, she started falling away. I said you had 2 years to get in amongst it, and right at that 2 year point, she turned the corner again. Now, if this was and that's Sydney, this is Melbourne. Now, the amazing part about this was the recovery was so quick. So October, November, it turned the corner, and we see it coming up. That's about December there. And if we had the data that showed us by February it was up here. It was actually above the previous peak. And now, because of the COVID thing, we've probably seen a leveling off. You'll see that probably just below the peak about now. And we may see it come off even a bit more down to about here. But once the COVID thing's all over and we get our back to work and everyone levels out, we're going to see that sort of creeping back up again under its normal trajectory. So that's my personal opinion as to why I prefer property over shares. Although, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of a mix. All right, so what we know is history repeats itself. The market has cycles. It's based on supply and demand. Our banking is secure, so if you got the loan, you're in a very, very good position. The government are always trying to keep our market afloat, and they use the housing and job levers to do that. The fundamentals don't change. We've seen the difference between what property and shares can do. Property shares can drop 50% overnight. Property, look, even during the GFC, we came off about 7 to 10%. During the last 2 years, we probably came off about 10 to 15%, but we made that up within 2 months, and maybe 3-4 months, and went above that previous peak. So don't let the media scare you. So now, next thing, media use sensationalism to sell. So their job is to do what? It's to get people to click on the market's going well. They'll overinflate how well it's actually going. And when the medium's gone, when the property market's gone a bit soft, they'll be spruiking gloom and doom. So the key is, do not let what you see in the papers, what you read in the papers, what you see on TV influence your business decisions. And this is a business decision. You need to do your own homework and don't rely, because these guys don't know. Most of them are just journalists straight out of uni. Most of them may have never even held an investment property. Do your own research. I read it because I need to be aware of it, because my clients are going to ask me about it. Beyond that, I could care less about what they say. They're peddling their stuff for advertising purposes only. Hindsight is 2020. So, everyone asks me, when's the best time to buy? Well, everyone's different. The short answer is yesterday. The real answer is, for me, 1985. Because in 1985, I was 20. I should have bought then. I didn't. I bought when I first property when I was 25. So I missed the boat by 5 years. But if you haven't dabbled in the property market yet, whether it's a PPR, whether it's an investment, you should get in sooner the better. We know what history says. The property market's going up. And I always say you need to mitigate your risk by surrounding yourself with professionals. Now that's financial planners, if you're getting into shares or investment properties, mortgage brokers when you're going to get that finance, obviously property professionals when you're looking for that property or selling that property. Simple. Now this is interesting for me anyway. This is a graph that shows how we need to keep reassessing what's happening. So this is put out by the AFR, ABS and Treasury, and what we can see here is, in the yellow line at the bottom, this was the projected growth for Australia from 2015 to 2055. This was projected back in 2003. 3 years later, in 2006, they did the same, went through the same process. Oops, we got that wrong. It's actually going to be not 26.6, it's going to be 28.5. 2 years later, in 2008, they went, that was really wrong, so it's going to be 35 million by 2055. And as we can see, they've redone it again in 2015, and it says 39.7. And then the boffins have got together and says, well, yeah, that's pretty conservative. We actually think it's going to be more like 47 million. So what we need to understand is these early projections are based on data that's historical. So they were looking at Peter Costello's mum and dad, 3 children, so one for mum, one for dad, and one for the country, and that's family of 5. So that's how they were working their projections. What we know now is that a lot of the immigrants come into Australia are from country who tend to have much larger families. So not only are we growing that number through immigration, but just through natural growth, internal growth as well. So I thought I always like that particular slide. This one here shows population growth for Victoria. 2051, we're expecting to have 10 million. We are on track to surpass Sydney in the very near future. This particular graph shows us how things are changing between 1991 and 2016 in terms of how these makeups look under any given roof. So the top left-hand square there, what we can see is back in the day, one family homes, pretty much 75%. That's dropped quite significantly down to 69%. Again, there's a number of reasons for that, but one of them would be that, again, the immigrants that are moving here are quite happy to have intergenerational families under one roof, and we can see that in the next slide or square to the right of that says it's grown from 0.7 to 1.9, so it's more than doubled the amount of people who are prepared to live with other family members, extended family members under one roof. Below that one we see groups. Not a lot of change there. That's typically, me when I was sort of 17 through to 22. Me and my mates all living together. And then the biggest shift is the people who live by themselves. So it's gone up by 20%, from 20% to 20.44. And what we have to take into account here is that's an opportunity. From a builder or an investor perspective, that's an opportunity that needs to be tapped into. Because what we do know is most of the stuff being built is targeting, it's like me, my last house I built was 4 bedrooms, a study, a media room, 2 living, formal dining, and there was 3 of us living in the house. We sold that house to a retired couple. There was only going to be 2 of them in there, right? So all these builders and developers and investors are out there building 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes, and yet the largest growing group are those people looking for 1-bedders or studios. So keep that in mind when you're putting together your strategy. What I've got into recently is, and I've been doing this for a couple of years now, but as of December last year, I've moved pretty much right away from doing anything else but these. To me, this is the way of the future. Class 1B developments, otherwise known as, so Class 1B is just the classification under the building code of a rooming house. And I say Class 1B because you say rooming house and people get scared. And look, I get it 100%. When I was first headhunted to do this stuff, I was approached by this lovely young lady who was very convincing, and she said, look, you need to come and look at this stuff. I said, what is it? She says, it's a Class 1B. I went, 30 years in the game, I've never heard of a Class 1B. Took me a while to get it out of her, but she finally said rooming houses. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, thanks. She said, no, look, you need to come and have a meeting with these guys, have a look at what they're doing, you'll change your mind. So I did. I went and had a meeting, had a look at what these guys were doing, and I fell in love with it. Where's this stuff been all my life? It's fantastic. So what is it? It's a house. So the house that you and I might live in is classified as a 1A. So one family or one extended family live under that same roof line. With these, you can have 4 or more sort of subletted rooms within the same property. So what we build is, it's not the old school slice and dice where someone's buying an old shitter of a house and converting it to a rooming house. We build these from the ground up. So we buy the old shitter, we knock it over, and we build this from scratch. So they have 9 self-contained studios. We recommend that you furnish them. They come with their own kitchenette, they come with an ensuite. If they're downstairs, they come with a nice little courtyard area. If they're upstairs, they have a balcony and their own heating cooling system with split air conditioning, and also within the facilities there's a large common kitchen with proper, full size ovens, because you can't have ovens in these rooms. They'll use microwaves or convection ovens, benchtop stuff, and also laundry facilities, which is another stream of income for you because these will be either coin or paywave operated. Some of the more recent ones we've done, the owners have actually opted to put in two machines, which I think makes a lot of sense. Now, the beautiful part about these is under the current Victorian planning laws, we don't need to go through town planning at all. All we need is a building permit, and away we go. No DA, no knocking on neighbours' doors telling them what you're doing, no advertising it. It's really straightforward. From the time you go unconditional on the site to the time it's handed over, it's typically 9 months. Extremely low vacancy rates on these due to the price point, and typically the yield is sort of between 8 and 9% plus your capital growth. Now, the capital growth on one of these can be sort of 20 to 30% in the first year. Now, the reason for that is you buy the land, you build on it, and then it's generating $150,000, $160,000 a year for you. That valuation will be based on a commercial setup. So based on, say, anywhere between 6.5% and 7.5% cap rate, which means if you're bringing in 150, 160, you're talking about 2.1, 2.2 mil that's worth, and it's probably cost you about 1.5 to build it. So there's a big uplift in capital growth right from the start. So here we see one of our examples of the single story. Now, question I get asked a lot is, so if you've got a large long site, it's good to put as many on the ground as you can because they have a courtyard larger than the balcony and they're easier to rent. Not that they're hard anyway, but these all ground floor always go first. Quite often I get asked, well, these must be much cheaper. The reality is not really, because you're using more concrete for the slab, you're using more iron on the roof or tiles, whatever you're using. And I've actually got one builder who says, please stop selling single story builds because they're harder and they're more, no cheaper. And he has to justify why it's almost the same price as a two-story. But in my books, if you can get as many on the ground floor as you can, it's much better for your tenants. It's a better lifestyle for them. Here's an example of a two-story. This particular one we built in Clayton, and the owner of this built 3 of them in the same street, and he pretty much does 100% international students. He has a connection overseas that provides the tenants for it. He claims that he has 110% occupancy because the students come in, their families pay cash up front for a full 12 months, but they only use it for 9 or 10 months, and then he can do what he likes with them for the other 2 or 3 months. So 110% occupancy rate. Here's an example of an internal. What we can see here is the ground floor studio setup. We've got sliding door out to the little outdoor courtyard area. We can see the kitchenette there with its convection oven. Plenty of storage. It's got the sink there. To the left you can see the door that goes through to the ensuite. At the bottom of the picture you can see where the bed's set up, and then you'd have the front door not far from the bed. So they're about 23 square metres. You supply them with all utilities and Wi-Fi, and what we call a suitcase ready, and the tenants love you for it. Here's some old plans that we don't use anymore, but it gives you a good indication of how we do this. You can see there that on the ground floor we've got 4 rooms, including one of them being specifically built for disability purposes, and then on the also the main kitchen, and then upstairs we've got the other 5 bedrooms. But you can see there, pretty sizable. I've made some changes in the designs I'll be doing moving forward, making them more rectangular, simply because it makes it easier to separate your living from your bedroom type situation. Here's a single story one. Again, all those rooms would have outdoor areas. We don't want to see that. Right, here's some case studies. This particular one, these guys are going to build multiple. You can see the branding they've got on the building there, but they picked up this site for $670,000. It was returning 20 grand a year, so let's call it 3% yield, and they've spent another 700 on it and generating 147,000, which is a gross yield of 11%. So significant upswing in your returns from these properties. Here's another one built from another one of my builders in Noble Park. He picked up the site for 540. This is actually owned by the builder himself. It was returning 19,000 at 3.5% yield. He's spent 1.23 on it. He's returning 140,000 on it, which again 11% gross yield. So by the time you pay all your outgoings, you're looking at about an 8% yield. This one's in Clayton, and obviously in Clayton, the price of the land is a bit more expensive there, given the proximity to Monash and getting closer to the city than the other two were. So 950, 700 for the land. It was returning 24,000, which is 2.5% yield. Banged on one from an exit strategy. We would sell it as a going concern at the commercial cap rate of 6.5 to 7.5%. As I said, we actually have a fund manager who will purchase these at 6.5%, providing they meet all their design and location requirements. And obviously, I provide them with their stuff, so I know what those are, and we pretty much are building the same for everyone across the board. And the returns that we have on offer, we would then look to potentially sell them to non-for-profits. So they can rent these out for about $180 a week, or you could do this. You can hand it over to Launch or Salvation Army or one of those groups. They would get you about $180 per week, which runs at about 3 to 4% cap rate. So they would buy them at that level, or we'd find people to sponsor the purchases of them. And I'm doing quite a bit of work with the people like the Salvos, Melbourne City Mission, Launch Housing at the moment, trying to drum up some business with them. So that's pretty much it. I haven't had any questions come through. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop it through now, 0412 969 366, and I'll answer it. If you don't have any questions, I guess we're done for the night. Flew through that pretty quickly. It took me 2 hours this afternoon, so I've gotten better. But look, I think the key thing is... Oh, that's right, I haven't touched on fractional investing. So I'm not sure if you have received, well, you would have received my emails discussing fractional investing. We're about to have our first opportunity to offer this. I sent off my final draft, and I'm expecting this to be approved by tomorrow. So why don't I run you through this? Alright, so these offerings are fantastic. They are absolute cash cows. They are recession proof. you won't just replace one income, you can potentially replace two incomes off the returns on these things. Those numbers I've shared with you are EBITDA, so before tax and depreciation and amortization. But look, that just through the sheer uplift of that capital growth in year one, backed up by $150,000 a year gross, says it all. So this is what we're going to be offering, hopefully in the next week or so, where we will be offering up the opportunity to buy shares on one of these builds. So we haven't built it yet. We haven't even selected the site. What we do is we do a fundraise. While the money is sitting in an account, you earn a little bit of interest, not much, but probably as good as, if not better than what you're getting from your bank at the moment. It sits in the account until we've raised enough funds. We want to raise 50%, so we're only borrowing 50%. You nominate how many shares you want, but let me run you through this and probably explain a little bit better. So I'm partnering with Domicom. They're the platform. They're listed on the ASX. They're the ones that have to be registered with the ATO. All of this gets run through ASIC, through ATO, to make sure that our clients are actually going to make money out of this, because not only is it great for individual investors, it's fantastic for self-managed super funds, and we all know what the government's like when it comes to self-managed super funds. You need to tick all those boxes, otherwise someone's in trouble. Certainly me to a degree, but more so Domicom. So we'll do a number of these, but the first one I'm only going out to my database with it. Hopefully we can get enough people interested in it to do it, and I've identified Heidelberg as the target area. Here's the numbers as they stack up. Obviously the valuation will come in. The first evaluation will come in at cost. It always does. So whatever it costs us to build it, that's what the valuation is going to come at. We'll be looking at a minimum of $3,060 per week rent coming out of it, which is a rental yield of 8 to 9%. The growth, the estimated capital growth for this particular suburb is 5 to 6%. So once we've achieved that massive uplift after year one, we can sort of look at these sort of numbers on an ongoing basis, and we're looking at minimum investments of 20,000. I think it might be 25, but I'll come back to you with that. Who should invest in these? So pretty much anyone. Individuals, retail investors, as I said, self-managed super funds. These are high-yielding properties. The key thing about self-managed super funds is that you pay down the debt, right? And this is going to allow you to do that because it's doing it, and we will set up so that the trust will have a set of agreements that says at the end of X amount of years, probably 5 years, we'll come back to all the shareholders and say, right, are we going to sell it? What are we going to do? But it would be written in that we'll probably take it to market after 5 years, and you can cash in your shares. However, there may be people within that group who want to continue and buy all the others out, just however that might work. And obviously, it's $20,000 a share. You can buy as many shares as you like, up to 800,000. This is a document I did for one we built in Bundoora. So the client picked up the land for $650. The stamp duty is in there. There was the build price, solicitors fees. We allowed 100,000 for miscellaneous, which we didn't really use much. We used about 30 grand just to furnish the place. So there was 70,000 came back from that. I've baked in 6% interest rate. Obviously, we get lower than that in most instances. Occupancy 95%. LVR. This one was 70%. It's a bit harder to get 70% at the moment. It's more like 60%. But here's how the numbers stack up. So as a 3-bedroom house, this property was getting $410 a week in Bundoora. Under this scenario, we predicted it would get 3,060. It's actually getting more than that. It's actually up and running. That was based on 340 a room per week, and I believe it's getting close to 360 per room per week. So annual income per year, 20 grand versus 153. Interest, so we said 5% as a house, 31,500. 6% as the rooming house, 63,000. Property management fee, 1,500 versus almost 11 grand. Rates 1,200, same. Utilities, nothing there. They weren't paying for utilities, but we did for the rooming house, so $4,500 for utilities. Insurance, obviously, under a rooming house, they're going to pay more insurance, so 2,200 for that instead of 1,200. Maintenance, 5 grand for the old property because it would need it. Things were pretty bad there, and 2,100 we baked into the rooming house. Now year 1, 2, and 3, you're probably not going to touch that, so you're going to end up with a kitty of about 6 grand, but year 7, 8, 9, you might start having to do some painting, stuff like that. So over the course of say 5 to 10 years, let's average it out at 2,000. At the end of it all, in the wash up, 40 grand is the outgoings for the residential house and 84,000 for the rooming house. Net income, 20 grand in the red for your house and $69,000 profit for the rooming house. Now, if you didn't have any borrowings on this property, return on your investment 8.79, so that's the yield. 1.5% for the residential property. Once we take into account your outgoings for interest, and then base it on your actual investment, so return on your cash investment, you actually lose money on this particular property, and you're up to about 19 or 18% return on your investment on this property. Not bad. So you've seen these examples. Those are the same examples I use on my other presentation. A little bit about me, a little bit about where we're going to be targeting. So we're targeting Heidelberg Heights. I love that area for this project, this type of project. These builds come at very high spec for a rooming house. Security cameras, high quality finishes throughout, timber floorboards, stone bench tops. We even have extinguishers in every room, built-in robes in each studio, downlights throughout, reverse cycle engine, air conditioning throughout. Now here's the floor plans, the new ones I was telling you about. So what I've done is I've run the corridors down the south side of the building. Now, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but I'm running my mouse up the corridor just to give these rooms, they're all facing north, they all have an outdoor area facing north. I put in wardrobes that run 90 degrees off of the wall, which gives you a space, sort of separates your bedroom area from your living area. So we can see this one here. You walk in the front door, there's your ensuite over here, your bedroom over here, your wardrobes here, kitchenette is up here, and you've got your wall-mounted TV and your little two-seater there. You'll have probably a coffee table there. There'll be a chair and 2 chairs and a table over here. Upstairs, pretty much the same thing. Up the corridor to your rooms. Why Heidelberg? As I said, this area has been on my radar for a while, and the investigations I've done to date show that there's nothing like this being built in Heidelberg at the moment. Up the road towards Bundoora, there's a few, but mainly the old style ones. There's one new one that we've built in Bundoora. So we've got La Trobe University up the road, we've got the RMIT, we've got Melbourne Polytechnic, heaps of public transport. We've got the Northland Shopping Centre. We've got a heap of medical facilities, including, it's all there in front of you, and there's lots of recreational space as well. So that's why we've identified that as a key target area. And we can see here, this is just for normal residential stuff. 2.3% vacancy rates. Our stuff will be 0.5, 1%, I'm sure of it. We can see here, not a lot of growth over the last 4 years. Units aren't too bad, 41% in the last 5 years. Houses only 33%. We can see here that the yields 3.2% for a house, 3.7% for a unit, versus 8 or 9% for what we're going to be offering up. 6,000 people live in the area. From memory, there's like 40% of the suburbs are renters. So it's a great area for what we're trying to offer. All right, well, that's me. I haven't had any questions come through, I don't think. Let me just check my phone. No questions have come through. So if there's no questions, I'm going to call it a night. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully we will be talking in the very near future. Thank you.